What's happening, everyone? The worldwide phenomenon known as Squid Game recently came to its epic conclusion, and there are a lot of people who are conflicted on this season. We've got some saying that it's absolute garbage, others saying that it was great, and some saying the show was straight mediocre, and I'd like to throw my hat in the ring on this topic. For the most part, I believe that Squid Game 3 is a satisfying conclusion to the Squid Game series. However, there are a few issues that I have with it that hold it back from being a perfect conclusion to the story. But before we get into that, I'd like to talk about some non-spoiler positives about what I liked about the show. I feel like this season as a whole benefited from the fact that this entire story was broken into a two-season structure, that being seasons 2 and 3, because it allowed for a lot of time for us to bond with the characters. So when they inevitably died and we got to see the impact of that, it landed with us significantly more than a lot of the deaths of the characters in the first season. Not saying that those deaths were bad in any capacity, because those have some of the most impactful deaths in the show, but I am saying that there are a lot more deaths that stuck with me in this season because of the fact that I got a lot more time to bond with these characters and see them struggle, as opposed to a lot of the characters in the first season that only had a few episodes of runtime to really sell who they were and connect me to them before they passed on. I think the story overall for this season was very good. I like the desperate struggle of seeing our characters trying to end the Squid Game. Meanwhile, Gi-yoon on the inside of the Squid Game is kind of losing himself because he feels like everything and anything that he's tried has failed. I think that was a great juxtaposition, and I believe that the final ending works extremely well, but I'm going to save that for later. Before we get into that, let's talk about the problems that I have with this season. And in order to do that, I have to go into spoilers. There are a handful of things that I have that really dampened this season. Not enough to make me hate it or anything, but it's just things that left me scratching my head. The first of which being that this show bends over backwards to make sure that the main characters do not win. And it ends up coming off in a way that feels a bit unrealistic. So in seasons 1 and 2 of Squid Game, when our characters lost, it felt reasonable. Like in the first season of the show, when Gi-yoon tried to tell the police about the Squid Game to get them to shut it down, he had no plausible evidence to prove to them to start an investigation. The only thing he had was the card with the phone number that he called to enter the Squid Game, but they had someone faking their identity now on that phone number, so there was no evidence proving that that's what that was. So it worked very well there. And then in season 2, when Detective Hwang was trying to convince the police to go on an investigation, he hid the fact that his brother was the main suspect in the crime. That way, the police had nothing to go off of except a guy in a mask shot him off a cliff in the middle of nowhere. We have nothing to do or expand the search from that, which made perfect sense. But in this season, we have characters acting really stupidly to the point that it left me sitting there extremely frustrated. Mainly on the aspect of Detective Hwang and then the other police officers in the season. Hwang is way too trusting of Captain Park in this season to a degree that makes no sense. Like, sure, this guy rescued him after he got shot by his brother at the end of season 1 of Squid Game. I almost said season 2, sorry. But after that, it's like you would imagine these guys grew up together. Like, he's super trusting of Captain Park, and it becomes a bit unreasonable. Because when Choi starts investigating Park, and he's just like, listen, Hwang, I know you trust the guy, but no one knows who he is. He has a very sketchy and vague backstory. He has no friends. He lives by himself. And when I saw him last night with one of our comrades who mysteriously died and disappeared into the ocean, so we can't inspect his body, Park was holding a screwdriver which you could use to stab somebody. That's really suspicious, and you would think it's weird because he told me that he just woke up from bed, but he was holding a screwdriver. That doesn't make any sense. But Hwang, even after hearing all of these points, is just like, don't worry about it. He's my boy. He saved me from the ocean. Why you hating on my boy? Stop hating on my boy. That's my brother right there. And it's like, dude, where is your sense of urgency? You are literally hunting down an organization that is able to trick the government and the police force into believing that they don't exist while they simultaneously kidnap and murder people for their own personal entertainment. Like, this isn't something that's completely out of the box and unreasonable. Like, why are you not buying any of this? It's completely absurd that this is the hill you're willing to die on. And then when it comes to the cops themselves, oh my god, were these cops so infuriating to me. I could not stand them. As I mentioned earlier, the cops in seasons 1 and 2 were very reasonable. They were plausibly ignorant, is what I like to say, to Squid Game's existence because, you know, they weren't convinced on the fact that they can start an investigation on this mysterious entity that exists. It's like if you told someone to go and hunt down the Illuminati. Like, sure, even if they might believe you to some degree, it's like, what do you expect me to do with that? Like, these people are essentially non-existent. They're not real. They're a myth to the people and public. Like, what do you want me to do here? Like, that's how Squid Game is in this universe. But these cops are just straight up stupid. They aren't plausibly ignorant to Squid Game. They're just idiots. Because Choi breaks into Park's house to find out who he is, and he learns that he's one of the soldiers from Squid Game. He finds an image of him with the Dakchi guy that was in Season 1 that they hunted down in Season 2. He finds a bag of money and the pink Squid Game suit, and he's like, this guy is one of the people from the Squid Game organization. He's one of their soldiers. I have to let Hwang know, and he got arrested before he could do so. And these cops, when he's like, listen, there's an organization of people that they kidnap individuals and force them to play stupid games where they die for their own personal entertainment, and me and my associates are looking for this place right now, but even if you don't believe me on any of these claims, the least you could do is believe that the guy I'm telling you about is extremely sketchy and suspect because he's got millions of dollars buried in his front lawn, as well as a military jumpsuit. And the cop's just like, well, old people just bury money in their front yard. That's just a normal thing. And, you know, what kind of criminal wears a pink jumpsuit? Starting with the money thing. I will admit, I live in America. I was born and raised here. This could be a cultural divide thing, but I have never met anyone that wasn't crazy that didn't keep their money in a bank account. Like, anyone who is crazy would take their money out and then bury it in their front yard or put it on their mattress, and they'd be like, I don't trust the government because they're trying to blah, blah, blah. Like, that makes sense to me, and I've seen that happen. But in regards to just old people in general, I have known old people who are past 100 years old that still had checking and savings account at banks and debit and credit cards. Like, I have never met an elderly person that is so unhinged that they decided to keep all of their money buried in their front yard. So the idea that this guy is like, no, this is just a commonplace thing that old people do. What old people? Where are they? This is what I mean by it might be a cultural divide. Maybe in Korea, old people are very distrusting of banks and they keep their money at home. I don't know. I don't know any people that live in Korea currently that can testify on this, but as it is right now as just a show, it's something that I can't buy into, and it feels a little weird because if this is a cultural thing, they didn't really do anything to relay that information to the audience, so it just left me frustrated with this being the reason as to why he doesn't believe in Choi's story. As well as the fact that he's like, oh, criminals can't wear pink. Brother man, did you write the handbook on what it means to be a criminal? On what people are allowed to dress like when they commit crimes? Because last time I checked, we live in a world where people have committed crimes in clown suits. We live in a world where children have committed atrocities. Like, there is no rhyme or reason to what a criminal is supposed to look like in today's modern society. So what in the fuck are you talking about that a criminal can't wear a pink jumpsuit? What are we on about here? This is one of the most ridiculous claims I've ever heard. And then the thing that pissed me off the most, the real cherry on top of this shit Sunday, is when the other cop, the dude's partner that caught Choi with him, calls Captain Park and goes, hey, someone broke into your house and they say that you're a criminal that's a part of an organization that kidnaps people and murders them for fun. I'm certain that has to break laws. You can't do that, right? Because let's put this in a different perspective, right? Let's say this is a domestic abuse situation. Let's say you, the viewer, broke into your neighbor's house because you know that they beat their wife. So you wanted to find evidence of it because she won't come forward, and you wanted to get the police on board so they would stop this guy and get her away from him, right? But you get caught because they have like a silent alarm or something, so the police catch you, and then you tell them this, and they're just like, I don't know, man, you don't really have evidence to prove that this is the case. And then the cop's partner who caught you then calls the husband that beats his wife and goes, hey, yo, did you know your neighbor broke into your house because he thinks you beat your wife? That's crazy, right? Like, you can't do that. I'm certain you can't do that because you can't prove that what they're saying isn't true right now. Sure, it may sound out of pocket, but that doesn't mean that they're lying. There's a possibility that they are to cover their own ass for the crime, but there's not a 100% guarantee. You can't disclose information like that because if that person is a criminal, then you just tip them off to the investigation that you're not going to do anything. Like, you can't do that. You can't do that. But again, I'm not a cop. I don't work in law enforcement. I'm not FBI. I'm not military and a police in any format. So, like, maybe, I don't know. Maybe that is how they operate in this world. But I don't think That's how that works. But now inside the game with the gripes that I have, it's just one specific moment that happens with Gi-yoon that I think was just really irritating because it could have just been written slightly differently. When all of the players want to murder the baby, Gi-yoon just says nothing. That entire scene, he's just sitting there holding the baby. And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, just tell them you'll give them the money. Like, they want to kill the baby to up the value of the money because they don't think the baby should be in the game whatsoever. And then they were planning to just forfeit and leave. Just tell them you'll give them the money. Because, I mean, you don't need it. You still have your winnings from the first Squid Game that you barely used. And you don't care about the money that you would get from this one or the baby's money. Just give them the money, or at the very least just say so. And if they don't believe you, then it's more plausible that they would be like, nah, you're just saying that so we won't kill the baby. Like, that'd be fine. I think that'd be fine if that was the case. But the fact that Gyu is just sitting there the whole time like, help me, is just like, it's just like, bro, what are you doing? What are you doing? Say something. You have words. Like, I think it worked earlier in the season when Gi-yoon was filled with rage and he wanted to kill the guy that didn't bring them the ammo and he just had, like, no words and he was just on full vengeance mode. I think that was fine when he didn't say anything. In this instance, brother man, speak. Please, I'm begging you. You need to say something. But that brings us to the conclusion of this show and my thoughts on the ending specifically. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I think that this ending is 100% good. I very much love it. The idea of our characters struggling for 3 seasons, trying to stop the Squid Game, and it completely blows up in their face. Gi-yoon having to sacrifice himself to save player 222's baby. Hwang getting to the island just moments too late to stop anything from saving Gi-yoon. I think all of that works really well. Seeing Choi get caught, delaying him from telling Hwang what's wrong so they could get there in enough time. All these tragic things happening back to back work so well with each other. I loved everything that they had to do, and the confrontation even in the final battle between Gi-yoon and MG was great because you know that Gi-yoon hasn't pressed the button, so the match hasn't started yet, and you know that even if he wins the fight, that it's over. He's cooked. He's gonna die because he wants to save the baby, so you know he's gonna go. And I love the fact that when he's giving the monologue about what humans are, he doesn't say what they are and he just drops off, leaving it up to the interpretation of the audience at hand. I think that all works phenomenally, and I love seeing the very end of the show where In-ho gives the money to Gi-yoon's daughter, and as he's leaving, he sees another branch officer for the American section of Squid Game playing Dakji to recruit them into the Squid Game in the streets for the next Squid Game competition. I loved seeing that because it makes you feel like there was never anything they could do. Even if our characters managed to succeed in taking down the Korean branch of Squid Game, it's global. They're everywhere. There's no stopping this thing, and no matter how hard you try, it's just gonna keep going and you're gonna get swept under the rug. I think that's a phenomenal way to end this kind of story. The director himself even came forward and said that this story can't have a happy ending, and that's why it ends in the morbid way that it does, and I think it works perfectly. However, my problem with it is that I know Netflix is going to make a spin-off of this show. I've heard rumors and such that they're in the works of making a Squid Game America edition, and it's just like everything that's impactful about this ending works if this show ends right now. If Squid Game as a franchise stopped right now, it would be perfect. Everything I just mentioned about our characters struggling to stop the Squid Game, about them failing, about it ended up being inevitable because this is a global thing that's going on, all of that only has weight if this show stops now. Because if we move on and we have a Squid Game America, then what exactly is going to be the point of that? Were we just going to follow new characters with their own reasons for being poor going into the Squid Game, and then we're just going to have more Squid Game? How would you even end that story in a way that has any level of impact like the original 3 seasons of the parent story? Like, it just doesn't work anymore if you don't do anything about that. So I feel like this ending needs to just be the end. Good things can come to an end. Alright, Vision said it himself.
But a thing isn't beautiful because it lasts.
So, like, just let Squid Game end here with its 3rd season. It works very well. We have a 3 solid seasons section of television that people can rewatch over and over again when they want to experience this story. But do not drag it out and create like 10 different spin-offs in various different countries of the world, because then you completely miss the point of this story. You miss the idea and weight behind everything, and I just don't want to see that happen to something, especially given the fact that I actually used to hate Squid Game. When the first season of this show came out, I had zero interest in watching this show because it was a death game. That was what the gimmick of this show was, that people kept glazing all over the internet. They were like, oh man, yo, you don't understand how crazy it is. Like, they play children's games where they die at the end. And that was the hook that people were telling people to get them to watch the show. But for me, I had been watching anime and reading manga
since I was 6 years old.
So I knew of that concept already. Like, by the time I was in middle school, I had already watched Dead Man Wonderland and Danganronpa, 2 amazing death game stories. So I wasn't surprised by this twist, and I was like, okay, but is there more? And no one ever really had anything extra to bring onto that. They're like, well, it's good, and like, that twist was crazy, like, don't you care? And I'm just like, no, I don't. So for years, I didn't watch the show, but then when season 2 was coming out, I decided to binge through both seasons, and I ended up falling in love with it, and I really like what they did with it, because for me, the games themselves aren't the best part of the show. It's the characters, the emotional stakes, and the greater depth behind the story. But, you know, most people, they fell in love with the gimmick of the games and everything, and I didn't. So I like this story, this series, for an entirely different reason than a lot of other people typically do. So I don't need more Squid Game. I don't need to see new children's games where people are risking their lives in it. I want this story to end here because it has a purpose. It has a deep meaning behind it, and I don't want to see that get squandered like so many other series that are forced into being massive franchises because someone wants to print money. So yeah, while I do believe that Squid Game has a phenomenal ending, that is my gripe with it, that I can understand why people have issues with this ending. Even though it's probably not what people have issues with the ending for. They just don't like it in general, probably because Gi-yoon died is part of it, but it is what it is. So those are my thoughts on Squid Game Season 3. I know mainly I focused on the negative here, but like, if I started telling you about all of the positive, I'd just be sitting here and this video would be like hours long, and I'd be like, well, you know, this episode was really good because it was tense, because of like the direction and everything, and like when Hyun died, I wanted to cry because even though I saw it coming, she deserved to live. R.I.P. My girl deserved better. Like, it would just turn into that, and I don't think anyone would really care about that. I could be wrong. And you might be sitting there like, oh, Cameron, I wish you would have done a multi-hour Squid Game review. It's like, well, it is what it is. Some things end in disappointment. But anyway, without further ado, I'm the innocent villain. Remember, folks, you're innocent until proven villainous, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.